Let's talk NBA and see what's happening in the second half of the season. Ryen Russillo, the Russillo Podcast, here with us on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline as a very intriguing second half set to go. A lot of guys unhappy. People want to move. Got great running, seedings, I should say, in the East. Should be fun. Ryen, welcome to the program. How are you, pal?
I'm good, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. All right, so here we go. Down the stretch they come. About 30 games left in the NBA. We are in the Philly market, so a lot of people wondering, all right, Sixers, Celtics, Raptors, Milwaukee. How are you looking at this Eastern Conference, which is very intriguing as we come down the stretch?
Yeah, just to get out of the way, with no Oladipo, the Pacers thing is an afterthought. But it's really close, okay? Milwaukee's been the steadiest. They've been the best defensive team. And they have the best player in Giannis. And when I look at Toronto, I think it's been this incredible transition from a really good player in DeRozan to one of the 4 or 5 best players in Kawhi. So it was actually easier to sort of plug one guy in for the other. And, watching what they do with Gasol, we'll see. Ibaka's been terrific, which I think is a big part of the resurgence. But the best version of Philly should be the best team in the East. And, I love Embiid. Simmons has his moments, and I worry kind of what he'll end up being, but some teams can't do anything with him. And now with all this size, with Harris coming over and Butler there, it's really hard to figure out how a smaller backcourt is going to handle these guys. I worry about Jimmy because I think you always have to worry about Jimmy, and I don't like how he fits in every night when I watch Sixers offensively. I can see he still wants to be kind of that ISO guy. But the best version of this is 4 guys plus one of the best shooters in JJ, where that's really what this game is. I mean, that's what the Warriors have been doing, and they don't really have 5 scorers that they can put out. Now, look, the Warriors roster's better, but we're talking about 5 guys that you're going to have to defend in some way. And if this does work out, I think Philadelphia should win the East. And the reason I even hesitate to mention Boston yet is because we're 2/3 into this, and I still don't know what the hell this team is supposed to be and what they're going to look like after Game 82.
Yeah, right. I mean, they have handled the Sixers in every incarnation. They beat them in the playoffs last year. They beat them on opening night.
Right.
They beat them on Christmas, and they beat them the other night. All 4 of those teams were different. I mean, none of those rosters were the same. But in the end, Mark Jackson was on with us the other day, and he said the Celtics are more gelled right now, but come April, the Sixers will end up, being the better team. Do you look at it as Boston just has Philly's number, or do you think that you wouldn't be concerned if Philly had to play Boston in a 7-game set?
Well, I don't know where Mark sees a gel team in Boston. Right after, when they started having these stretches where you feel like, they're starting to figure it out, then they lose to the Lakers after blowing a huge lead in the last-second shot. You go, okay, fine, Thursday night game, Rondo's back. And then they blow a 28-point lead to the Clippers after Kyrie goes down. And Kyrie's been in and out of the lineup. They've had all these other guys going in and out of the lineup. I still don't know what they are. Gordon Hayward's taking forever. He gets benched, and then he'll have moments. So I would disagree with Mark that they're more gelled than Philadelphia because even though they didn't make any transactions, there's been no consistency to this. The thing Boston does, I would say better than anybody, and part of it's personnel and part of it's Brad Stevens, is that Horford just gets up for playing Embiid. I mean, other big guys can't handle Embiid, and Horford, although not nearly the athlete Embiid is, when you watch what he does defensively, he picks him up. He picks him up earlier. He doesn't give up ground. Whenever Embiid tries to get deeper position, Horford does an incredible job of just kind of cutting him off and staying parallel with him. And one of the things is, as much as I love Embiid, I think you guys realize this, in late-game situations, there's a bunch of challenges that Philadelphia's had, and some of that's changing personnel, some of that's playing Simmons differently the last couple of minutes. But Boston and other teams do this, that if you ISO Embiid and just let him work in the post, when you're that big and as great as his handle is for a guy that size, it's just easier to screw him up when you send that double or you send a delayed double over to him. So Boston just has figured out all of that stuff, and they do a really good job of ignoring Simmons, as we saw in the playoffs. So I think Stevens has a big part to do with that, but now we're talking about 2 other scorers. Butler can get his own, and Harris, the great part about him is that he's not a massive usage guy. He's not somebody who needs the ball constantly to still be effective. So I would think the best version of Philly would be able to beat Boston this time around, but I just haven't seen the best version because it's new in Philly, and as far as Boston's concerned, I don't know why 2/3 of the season of watching them, I'm just supposed to assume all the talent's going to figure it out because they haven't all year.
Ryan, it's not Philadelphia sports if we're not talking about the fan base overreacting and screaming for a head coach's head for them to be fired. So you mentioned Jimmy Butler's fit with the Sixers. You mentioned Embiid down the stretch. Who do they give the ball to? A hot topic around here is Brett Brown the guy for this team now moving forward with essentially 4 All-Stars, a different bench, locked and loaded, ready to make a playoff run? What are your thoughts on Brett Brown's fit in Philadelphia?
I can't believe that Philly is having a hard time with this, considering it's a fan base that hates my guts ever since last year. When I just didn't think a new team would be that good, and we all know the history on that one. So Philly fans being upset about it is not a huge surprise. But Brett, look, we all like Brett. I think he deserved to get to play with the good toys after having to go through what he went through. So I think that was the right thing to do. And in sports, the right thing doesn't really happen that often. But there's some late game stuff where when I watch them, I don't know what they're doing. I don't. And sometimes I wonder if it's just because of Simmons' skill set, and teams, like I mentioned, will play him differently. In a way, Simmons, as exciting as it can be sometimes I think it's unfortunate that him and Embiid are on the same team, because he's probably the worst point guard to be matched up with an Embiid. I just think Simmons would be better without Embiid because he wants to pose, and sometimes I think Embiid would be better without Simmons because he just would love to have a guy to kick it out to on a double team and be able to shoot from the outside. So that's part of the problem for Brett. But if Jimmy has a problem with Brett, I can see where Jimmy's frustrated. Like, I see the stuff that they do, but Brett's trying. He's trying to stagger these minutes the right way. But that doesn't mean anything when they're closing, because all those guys should be out there. I think the best way to answer it would just be if they have an early exit, if they have an unexpected exit in the playoffs, then Brett's going to be in trouble, just because that's the way the job works. He's been there a long time, and they've invested. They've moved major assets to grab 2 guys that are both free agents, and I don't know if they're going to re-sign both of those guys. So I can understand the Sixers' frustration or the fan base, and I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm just saying that they're probably, if they're anti-Brett Brown, they're probably going to get their wish if the playoffs don't work out.
I just want to interject with this question for you. Ryen Russillo, the Russillo Podcast. Take a listen. Brad Stevens, I think a lot of people recognize he's probably a better coach than Brett Brown. I don't think that's an argument from even the biggest Brett Brown fan. But in a 7-game series, I was trying to go back through a time where you would say the lesser team won because they had the better coach. You know what I mean? Like, talent typically wins out. Like on a Tuesday night in February, the better coach, he gets you. But do you think that having the better coach does make that big difference when it comes down to the 7-game series, or will the more talented team eventually just win out?
Well, I think the more talented team that knows how to play off each other, it doesn't. I don't think the coach matters that much. I mean, Brad Stevens has done some things throughout his run where you go, they're a number 1 seed with Isaiah Thomas as the best player. Like, how did that happen? Their second best scorer was Avery Bradley. And then you look at that Sixers series last year, and at one point Philly's 25-25. They had Bellinelli, they had Ilyasova, and then they're playing a bunch of tanking teams at the end, and they end up as a 3 seed. So you go, wait a minute, does that mean they were totally overrated and that they really weren't that good? Or should they have beaten a Boston team that didn't have Kyrie? We know they didn't have Hayward. Celtics fans change their mind every day about Horford being the most overpaid guy or a Hall of Famer. Half of my Boston friends think he stinks still, and I'm a huge Horford fan, but I understand his limitations. And Jaylen Brown went off, and Tatum started. So you had Jaylen Brown as a second-year guy, Tatum as a rookie, and Philly had, I thought, the 2 best players in the series, in Embiid and Simmons, and it wasn't really close. So that is advantage Brad. I don't think there's anybody in the NBA that would tell you Brett's a better coach than Brad. So that's a bad mark for Brett on that one, but over all the years of all this stuff, there can be little spots here or there, evidence that a coach outcoached the other guy, but more often than not, I mean, we all know who's standing there at the end is the guy with the best players. So Brad's done some things, but he's also done it in an awful East. I think sometimes we forget how bad this has been and how exciting the top is this year for the playoffs.
Yeah, it's definitely something new and exciting. And I want to go back to Boston real quick with you, Rye. And Kyrie Irving, we talk a lot about this on the show. I don't know if he's a team's number 1 guy. I don't know if he's the guy that can lead a franchise to an NBA championship. We all know the huge shot he hit against Golden State with Cleveland, but outside of that, and you look at all of the mess that I don't want to say he's created, but has had a big influence on with the Boston Celtics this year. I just want your thoughts, being a Boston guy, on what is Kyrie moving forward? Is he the franchise piece for an organization, or is he just more of a 1B type of guy?
I know as radio hosts, we have a hard time doing these phoners because you forget that, oh, yeah, you don't have to fill 7 or 8 minutes here. So if you guys just want to hit a buzzer at some point, because I have a lot. The Kyrie thing is very complicated. I am a huge fan of Kyrie, the scorer. I don't think there are 5 guys in the league that are as good as he is at just scoring. Okay, he's the best small finisher, even over Iverson. I'll say it.
How dare you?
You can't say that.
Come on, Rye.
I know. And Philadelphia fans are just starting to come around maybe on this phone.
They just turned the corner.
I think I think Kyrie's the best small finisher I've ever seen. I'm serious. It's unbelievable how he finishes. The shots, the resume, the whole thing. His defense is actually even a little bit better after basically not playing it like the first 7 years of his career. But Kyrie, the guy, is I think it's difficult to be around him 82 games. And I think you're starting to see that with some of the quotes. I think he's the guy, and it's different because none of us have ever done anything that's important enough to lead an NBA team as a player. But do you ever have that group, that group, and there's like the one guy in your group of friends that just, it's like, man, you're around, and we like you, but you're kind of delusional about yourself. And I think what happens is that Kyrie, he finally gets the divorce from LeBron, which I actually initially was like, man, what's Kyrie's problem? The more you heard about it, you're like, well, if he was going to get traded to help LeBron, then I kind of understand where Kyrie was coming from. But I also think it was his quest of, self-discovery and becoming a franchise guy. And then you get to go to this great historic franchise like Boston, and then you play everybody on opening night by saying, oh, if you'll have me, I'm going to re-sign. And Boston was pretty confident that, this thing's going to get done, it's going to get re-signed. And then he drops this thing at the trade deadline where it's like, don't even bother, ask me July 1st. You're like, whoa, dude, what's with this 180? I think he seeks this higher level of enlightenment and this quest for leadership and all these things. And I actually don't think, and this is me removed from it, so I'm not going to react, but I just don't know that he has the skills to be that person that's that guy that everybody loves. You're a baller, okay? We respect your game, but you're not that much older than us. And, yeah, you got a ring, but, like, what are you going to do? Like, you're going to start telling us? Like, not every guy who's the best player actually is built to be a real leader and command respect that way from everybody else. And I think those are some of the challenges for Kyrie.
Ryen Russillo here, the Russillo Podcast here on 97.3 ESPN. Talking NBA as we get ready for the second half. There's so much to dive, especially on this East side. Ryan and I, the Ryan sitting here, not you and I, Ryan,
the less
have debated this one back and forth, and I want to see how you feel about this, because I think it is interesting that the Raptors, they're back at the top again. They're the 2 seed. But Ryan would say, I've seen this act before. And I would say, they never had Kawhi Leonard, dude. Like, come on. Like, I don't care that they won 60 games in the past and then flamed out. Kawhi Leonard makes them different, doesn't he? I mean, don't you feel differently about the Raptors because they have Kawhi, or am I just on my own island with this?
No, you have to change your mind because of Kawhi, okay? The Raptors thing, I remember, it's one of those things where you have these kind of sports regrets. And I remember being mad at myself. I'm still mad at myself years removed for kind of buying into them in 2015 into 16. And I'm going, you know what? This team is tough. They're adaptable. They can go small. They're fighters. It's that stuff in the past. It's over. Because if you go back and look at Lowry and DeRozan's playoff numbers, they're terrible for guys that are max guys that talk about who they are and they're standing in the league. I mean, those dudes would get together and just miss shots. Like, hey, what do you want to do? Let's miss every shot we take for the next week. They had to bench DeRozan against the Cavs. I mean, LeBron owned their souls. But that was about those 2 guys. So maybe, you can make an argument, and I might agree with you, that Lowry's going to fold again. I mean, you really go back and look at their game logs, you're like, these guys were terrible for years. Lowry, I mean, we're going all the way back, but, like, he started getting thrown out of games. But with Kawhi, you have to start fresh. You have to start fresh with a new system, with a new coach. And Siakam's been a major part of this thing. I thought Ibaka was probably washed a couple years ago. He was like a 6'9" 2-guard, and he's found it again and allows them to go small. We'll see what happens with Gasol because they're using him with a million different lineups. So I understand the franchise doubt, but I'm not going to doubt somebody like Kawhi. And here's the thing is I really don't know what to expect out of any of these four teams. I really don't. And that's a great feeling for the first time in like 8 years in the East.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know how Toronto's going to play out down the stretch, but with Milwaukee, Ryan, I want your thoughts on them because here's my strategy or opinion with Milwaukee. Great team, very well coached. They have the perfect pieces around the Greek Freak. He's able to win them games throughout the regular season. January, February, early March. That's what they're built for.
We're aware when the schedule comes.
Right. Yeah, okay, whatever. They're playing now, if you didn't know. So, anyway, my point is he's the only star they have. Come playoff time, I don't know if he can carry them multiple series to get 4 wins in 10 to 12 days. I just don't think he's going to run out of gas at some point, and I predict them to lose in possibly the second round of the Eastern Conference playoffs. I want your thoughts on how equipped the Bucks are to make a deep playoff run.
We have a couple players in this league this year that you go, okay, this guy's awesome, and then they take it to this next level. Anthony Davis was doing that before he decided to just shut down on everybody. Paul George has done that in Oklahoma City, and Giannis is the other one. And he's doing it in a way where it's still an outdated thing, even though I don't know, I got to go look at his game log again, but I feel like he's looked more comfortable shooting threes lately. They spread you out. Budenholzer's done a great job with it. Bledsoe's actually been really good, too. And Middleton, after a slow start, ends up making the All-Star team, which maybe has more to do with their record and all that kind of stuff. So we know that they have some guys that can break you down. I think the overall thing, and I get your point here, but the overall thing will be how does a team kind of lock in defensively knowing they're playing Giannis this many games in a row, right? Because I think you guys see with Ben,
yep,
and there's some similarities there with Simmons and Giannis, that teams will try to build this wall to Ben in transition and then ignore him. And I see the same thing with Giannis, but Giannis has become, and Ben was always a great passer, but Giannis has become a better passer at realizing, okay, when they build this wall against you, and it's going to be consecutive games, how are you going to adapt around that? We know they can spread you out the whole time. They're right there with Indiana right now as the best defensive team in the NBA. So because Giannis is that good, and because they're playing defense, and because they're spacing, if they lose in the second round, it's going to be because the other team in those top 4 was really good, and maybe they win a 7-game series. So I don't look at Milwaukee saying they're flawed, or I don't look at Giannis going, I don't know how to keep this up. I'm just going to be really curious if there's a team that kind of cracks this code a little bit by slowing Giannis down and focusing all on him. And if he adjusts off of that, then guys are going to have wide open shots.
We'll close out with Ryen Russillo here, the Russillo podcast. And, the state of the league. I mean, you got a lot of guys, as Anthony Davis think. We talked about, what's going on with Kyrie and KD. And it seems that every year guys want to move on and they're not happy. It's time to get out of this place, the small markets. You got tanking going on, which here in Philadelphia we embrace, of course. But if you're doing it elsewhere, come on, man, the league stinks.
It's a problem.
The ratings, there was that report, ratings are down. I don't know how much to read into that, but where do you think the state of this league is, especially Golden State at the top? I mean, is the league have good stability? Do you like the direction with all the threes, etc.?
Wow. Okay, so a state of the union here for the NBA.
The Ryen Russillo State of the NBA.
The rating thing I'm not worried about unless I see more evidence to tell me it's in its trending, direction there. So as of this point right now, I think it's too soon to go, everybody's down on the ratings because the ratings have been up. Where it's positioned the best globally. It's positioned better with youth and technology. And I think NBA fans are great because they really care about other games. I think a Sixers fan is going to watch a West Coast game because they just like the NBA. And that part is all great. The tanking thing's improved a bit. I'm sure that's something that's cyclical. I don't really know how to fix that because it's really hard to pull off trades. And the way cap space works, I always think is stupid because if you have rookie contracts, then you have cap space, even though you got to extend those guys. And then if you've extended guys and you never have any cap space, and then if you do have cap space, you don't get A, B, or C, you're going to sign D to max money just to say you used it. So there's a lot of problems with how hard this league is to pull off different transactions. So I'm sympathetic to teams to tank, even though no one would sit there and say, hey, it's a great business model, what we had a few years ago when a third of the league teams were trying to tank before it even tipped off. But the number one issue right now, and I don't know how to solve this because the owners didn't want long contracts. They wanted shorter contracts. That led to more player movements, and then the owners didn't want player movements, so then they had these super maxes, but it coincided with the cap spiking dramatically. So guys are willing to leave money on the table, which is something we always criticize athletes for growing up. Oh, you're just about the money. And now guys are taking less money to go pursue wins, and now we're mad at the ring chasing. So, yeah, I'm sure there's a little Golden State fatigue. And some have argued that Golden State's the reason why all these guys are jumping ship, but I don't think that's going to be the case because once this Golden State thing is over, you're still going to have players that are empowered and want to move out, and that is the number one issue. You can't have a league where you could argue, 7, 10 of the top 15 guys in the last few years have been so mad that they forced their way out. You know, LeBron's unhappy. He didn't force his way out. He left as a free agent. Durant was unhappy, and now he's unhappy again. He's just mad at everybody all the time. Chris Paul was upset. Kawhi took an entire year off. Paul George told the Pacers, you better trade me. Kyrie forced his way out of Cleveland. We're having this stuff happen with Anthony Davis where a year and a half left after doing a max deal, you had to go nuclear option and try to get your way to L.A. before the trade deadline when the Pelicans knew, you know what, there's no rush and there may be better offers this summer, and if not, we'll take that Lakers deal in June. So even though there's so many in the media that I work with that have made this pivot from, criticizing the player to now just hating management in any role. And I think it's great that we don't dump on athletes. They're special guys, We're emotionally attached to these dudes. But just because you're this special and one of the great athletes in the world, a contract's a contract, and there's always going to be employer-employee relationships here. And, yeah, most of us all have to answer to somebody. And even if you're 7-1 and can hit threes, when you sign a contract, you're going to have to answer to somebody at some point. So I don't think that long-term, it's great that every 6 months, one of the best players in this league decides, oh, I don't like my situation, and, yeah, I have a contract, and I'm out of here. Not everyone's the same. I'm not criticizing them all, but I'm also not giving this collective pass to every dude that says he wants out, which I think is actually happening. So it's good for the player because they go, man, I don't even get crushed that much anymore. I mean, Jimmy Butler's been mad, 3 times now in less than 2 years? Like, what imaginary team does he think is going to solve all of his problems? I worry about that because I do think it's kind of, maybe this is hokey and maybe this makes me sound 40, but I don't care. I think it's kind of cool if your team drafts a really good player, though. That player's on your team for a long time and you get to root for him.
Hey, I say it all the time, Ryan, through the whole process years, whatever, that it was worth 3 years of that to get to watch Joel Embiid play every night. It's a treat, man. It's much better than watching Andre Iguodala and Evan Turner. I can tell you that much.
Are you sure about that?
I'm 100% positive, man.
I get killed on my phone because the Embiid thing, because I was calling around being like, what's the number on this contract? And I was actually talking to other teams being like, I don't know if I want to do that deal. And now, people think I don't like Embiid in Philadelphia, but I've never seen a player improve and figure out the game that quickly in one season of college at Kansas. So I love him, and that's the whole point of tanking, is that you hope you have the right, because all these other teams that tank, it doesn't guarantee anything.
No.
You hope you just have the chance to get one of these franchise-changing guys. And, there aren't 10 of them really in the league that totally change a franchise. Look at Minnesota. You would have thought, oh, my gosh, this totally worked. Wiggins in a trade and then Karl Anthony Towns. And they still are soft, and they still can't figure it out. And, I watch them going, this was supposed to work. So when you see something like Embiid pay off after all the problems early on, where you go, how does this story end when he doesn't play any games? Like, this guy's just going to be a stud, and it turned out to be a stud. The skill was always there. You just wondered, could he stay healthy? So you're right. You're absolutely right. Like, this was worth all of that pain to be able to have this guy, and that's why you hope, hey, I don't ever want him to be upset in a couple of years and decide halfway through a max contract that he doesn't like Philadelphia or he doesn't like the team around him. And that's the reality of today's league, and I think it's exciting to talk about, and it's awesome in the summer, but it's also incredibly disappointing for a lot of fan bases. I mean, think about Pelicans fans. They're going, oh, cool.
It sucks. Yeah,
you have 29 teams in your imaginary list.
He's Ryen Russillo. Check out the Russillo podcast if you want to hear more from him. He was just on the Bill Simmons podcast. Both of them available at iTunes. And great NBA second half. Let's see it come down as the East should be a lot of fun. Golden State, just I will spoiler alert, they're going to win the West. Ryan, appreciate it, man.
All right, thanks, guys. It was fun.